You feel the aura coming. The sensitivity to light, the nausea, and then the crushing, pulsing pain. You're forced to retreat into a dark, quiet room, popping painkillers and waiting for it to end. But what if your migraine isn't just a random neurological glitch? What if it is an extreme biological alarm system warning you that your brain has run out of energy? Today, we are exposing the metabolic secret to migraines. This video is for educational purposes only. If you experience the worst headache of your life, a thunderclap headache, sudden numbness, or difficulty speaking, this is a medical emergency. Call 911 immediately. Never stop prescribed neurological medications without consulting your doctor. Let me begin by making one thing very clear, because this distinction matters. A classic migraine is often a throbbing or pulsing headache, frequently one-sided, and it can come with light sensitivity, nausea, vomiting, and sometimes aura. A tension-type headache is more often described as a tight band, pressure, or muscular squeezing around the head, and it usually does not come with aura or nausea. That is why this video is focused on migraine, not generic headache pain. And if you have lived with this, I want to say something directly to you. Your pain is real. Migraine is not just stress, not just in your head, and not something you should have to simply endure. The pattern matters. The symptoms matter. The timing matters. And when the right clues are present, migraine is telling us something important about brain physiology. In migraine, the brain is behaving like a system under strain. The headache is not random chaos. It is a patterned neurologic event with recognizable features. Light sensitivity, nausea, aura, and pulsating pain are classic migraine clues. And that is exactly why clinicians separate it from tension-type headache instead of treating all head pain the same way. So in the next section, we are going to ask the most important question of all. What is the brain actually reacting to? Because once you understand the pattern, you stop blaming yourself, and you start seeing the biology. If you are the person who has been told to just take something and push through, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve an explanation that makes sense. And migraines do make sense when you understand the brain's alarm system. Now let us go one layer deeper. In a functional neurology and metabolic framework, one of the most important things to understand is this. The brain is not a passive organ waiting for pain to happen. It is an organ with an enormous energy demand. Even though it is only about 2% of body weight, it uses roughly 20% of the body's energy at rest. And glucose is its primary fuel. That means when your energy supply is stable, the brain can do its job quietly in the background. But when fuel delivery becomes unstable, the brain does not tolerate that instability for long. It becomes more excitable, more reactive, and more vulnerable to symptoms. Migraine research increasingly points to abnormalities in energy metabolism, mitochondrial function, and oxidative stress as part of the migraine picture. And this is where the concept of a brain energy deficit becomes powerful. It does not mean the brain is broken. It means the brain is running too close to empty, too often. In the migraine literature, researchers describe a mismatch between cerebral energy reserves and demand. And that mismatch can help explain why the nervous system becomes so sensitive during an attack. When mitochondria cannot keep up, oxidative stress rises. Think of oxidative stress as biochemical friction. Too many reactive byproducts. Not enough metabolic stability. That stress changes how neurons fire, how blood flow is regulated, and how easily the brain slips into a migraine state. This is one reason migraine can feel so overwhelming. The system is not just hurting, it is dysregulated. In other words, the pain is not meaningless. The brain is sending a very loud signal that something in its internal energy economy is off. Clinically, That is why migraine often comes with light sensitivity, nausea, and the need to retreat into darkness and stillness. It is the nervous system under metabolic pressure, demanding reduced input so it can recover. So here is the key message of this chapter. Migraine is often not just a pain event. It is a brain energy event. And once you see it that way, the next question becomes obvious. What keeps pushing the brain toward that deficit in the first place? That is where the blood sugar roller coaster enters the story. Now we get to the trigger that many people never hear explained correctly. The sugar crash. In metabolic terms, reactive hypoglycemia means your blood sugar rises after a high sugar or refined carbohydrate meal, and then drops too far or too fast as insulin overshoots the job. That sudden swing can leave the brain underfueled and metabolically irritated. This is not about one bad food in isolation. It is about a roller coaster pattern: spike, surge, crash. And the migraine-prone brain does not like roller coasters. It prefers stability. The more dramatic the glucose swing, the more likely the nervous system is to interpret that instability as a threat. Why does that matter so much? Because migraine biology is tightly linked to energy handling in the brain. Research reviews have found evidence of altered glucose metabolism, glucose hypometabolism, and mitochondrial inefficiency in migraine, which helps explain why a fuel drop can become a neurological event instead of just a brief dip in energy. In laboratory work, glucose availability also changes the brain's vulnerability to spreading depression, the phenomenon closely linked to migraine aura. Studies have shown that glucose modulation affects spreading depression susceptibility, and low glucose states can make the cortex more prone to that wave of electrical instability. That is the point where the story can escalate from a simple crash into a full migraine cascade. The brain, sensing danger in its energy supply, becomes more excitable. Oxidative stress rises. Neural signaling becomes less stable, and the body may respond with aura, nausea, light sensitivity, and pain as part of a larger protective shutdown. So when someone says, "My migraine came out of nowhere," very often it did not. The body may have spent hours on the blood sugar roller coaster before the attack finally crossed the threshold. A missed meal, a sugary breakfast, a refined carb lunch, or a long stretch without food can all set up the same metabolic trap in a susceptible person. And that is why this chapter matters. If the trigger is unstable glucose, then the strategy is not just to numb the pain after the fact. The strategy is to stop the crash before the migraine threshold is reached. That is the metabolic lens we are building here. In the next chapter, we will talk about how stabilizing fuel availability changes the terrain of the migraine-prone brain, and why some people improve when they move away from blood sugar volatility. At this point, the logic becomes very practical. If migraine is, in part, a brain energy problem, then one of the most powerful strategies is to stop forcing the brain to live on unstable glucose swings. That is where low carbohydrate and ketogenic approaches enter the conversation. A ketogenic diet shifts the body away from constant glucose dependence and toward ketone production. Ketones are not a crisis fuel. They are a real alternative fuel for the brain, and the literature also suggests they may influence neuronal excitability, which is highly relevant in migraine biology. That matters because the migraine brain appears to be hypersensitive to metabolic instability. Reviews of ketogenic therapy in migraine suggest it may help reduce attack frequency and severity in some patients, but the honest clinical message is that this is promising support, not a universal cure. Think of it like this. Glucose is a fuel source that can swing up and down. Ketones are a steadier burn. For a migraine-prone nervous system, Steadier fuel can mean fewer metabolic alarms, less oxidative strain, and less pressure to enter that migraine shutdown pattern. Some clinical studies and reviews also point to improvements in migraine intensity, frequency, and fatigue with ketogenic or very low carbohydrate approaches, especially when they are structured carefully rather than improvised. Now, this is important. Ketogenic therapy is not something to force blindly. The safest version is the one that is individualized, monitored, and appropriate for the person in front of you. Work with your neurologist or clinician before making major changes to your diet or medications. But the big idea is simple. If the brain is calmer when fuel is steadier, then your strategy is not just to chase pain after it starts. Your strategy is to build a metabolic environment where the migraine threshold is harder to cross. That is brain stabilization, not symptom suppression. Now that you understand why stable fuel matters, the final question is this: how do we turn that science into a practical daily protocol that supports glucose stability and reduces the crash pattern? So now we arrive at the practical question. What do you do with this information? The goal is not to chase every symptom after it appears. The goal is to create a metabolic environment where the brain is less likely to enter a crisis in the first place. Migraine is often linked with diet-related triggers and metabolic instability, and lower glucose or more stable dietary patterns may help some patients, although the quality of evidence is still mixed and not every person responds the same way. That is why the protocol comes back to the same foundational principle: stabilize the terrain, reduce the spike and crash cycle, support consistent energy delivery, and stop treating migraine like a random event when the pattern is often showing you a fuel problem. Reviews of migraine nutrition repeatedly note that diet patterns, fasting, and certain carbohydrate patterns can matter, and irregular intake is a recognized trigger pattern for many patients. This is where some people choose a structured low glycemic or ketogenic style plan, because steadier fuel can mean fewer metabolic alarms. Clinical reviews describe ketogenic and other dietary interventions as promising for some migraine patients, with emerging but still limited evidence. And alongside food strategy, some people look for a supplement-based layer of support. In that context, Sugar Defender is marketed as a botanical blood sugar support formula intended to promote healthier glucose balance and steadier daily energy. That is a product claim from the brand, not a substitute for medical care, and it should be treated as support rather than a cure or migraine treatment. The right way to think about a metabolic support product is as one tool inside a larger plan: consistent meals, fewer refined carbohydrate spikes, adequate sleep, hydration, and clinician-guided migraine care. That broader lifestyle and nutrition framework is where the strongest practical benefit usually lives. Diet interventions and lifestyle modifications are repeatedly discussed in migraine reviews, while the evidence base remains individualized rather than universal. So if someone is tired of living on the blood sugar roller coaster, the message is not, take one thing and hope. The message is, build a repeatable metabolic routine that reduces crashes, supports energy stability, and gives your brain a better chance to stay out of the migraine threshold zone. Glucose instability and reduced glucose availability have long been discussed in the migraine literature as potential contributors or triggers. If you decide to explore a product like Sugar Defender, do it with a clinician's awareness, especially if you use blood sugar medications, migraine medications, or you have any medical condition that could be affected by glucose changes. Supplements are not neutral for everyone, and they should be integrated, not improvised. So here is the takeaway. The objective is not to fight your brain. The objective is to feed it more steadily, lower the metabolic noise, and reduce the probability that a sugar crash becomes a migraine cascade. Review literature supports the idea that dietary interventions may help some migraine patients, especially when the approach is individualized and sustainable.